The second episode of the season confirms something we have speculated about all this time. The fact that the Lake of Tears is where the children are being held, and it's the ultimate destination our protagonists need to reach. But the episode revealed even more information that I'm sure will be relevant in the upcoming events. Let's start this video with the most important part of this episode, the final scene with Jim and Ethan. I know I'm late to the party, and I won't overanalyze Jim in this scene. I'm sure a lot of channels have already done that. I'll only give you a brief explanation. This Jim is not the same Jim who died in the last episode of Season 3 because of the scar. First of all, I want to address something that I saw being discussed throughout the fandom. Jim is dead. I'm sorry, but he is not coming back to life. And this is not Jim storywalking. I saw some theories saying that Julie would storywalk, teach her father to storywalk as well, and Jim would be saved and appear in the future. I don't think this would be possible, and honestly, it would ruin the show for me if it became true. My main problem with this is the idea that somehow all the characters would gain superpowers, which would ruin the whole concept of people trapped in a world full of monsters. This is what makes this story so compelling. It's the battle between David and Goliath, the weak versus the strong. You are watching because you are curious to see how this inferior force could overcome those odds. But if somehow everyone got powers, then this idea of the weak versus the strong would disappear. It wouldn't be as compelling as it is now. This Jim is the same as Father Khatri or Tom. Previously in the series, we had Jade explaining the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form into another. That line wasn't just random dialogue. It was foreshadowing that would explain those apparitions. People who died in that place are trapped there as well. If you are a regular watcher, you might know about my theory that the voices Sarah hears belong to the people who died there. The reason why Ethan saw this version of Jim is because it's the most familiar version Ethan is used to seeing. Ethan wasn't present when Jim died, so he didn't see how he looked at that moment. This is why Jim's energy took on a familiar form for Ethan. This is also why Boyd could see Father Khatri and why Jade sees Tom. The bartender was the only one who could keep up with Jade in a philosophical conversation. Also, Jade was sleeping at the bar, the place where Tom spent most of his time. So that place attracted his energy. People are seeing the ghosts of the people whose energy they were most connected to. Tabitha could see the children because she spent all her energy in the previous cycles trying to help rescue them. Taking all of this into account, this is why Ethan saw this version of Jim. Now, I believe that once you are dead, you gain access to certain information. Knowledge comes with a cost, but it also needs to come with some rewards. The balance has to be maintained. Maybe after Jim died, the other voices there informed him of everything about that place. We can see his odd behavior looking all around him. For me, this is because he isn't used to being in his ghost form, and he can see all kinds of entities. I also believe there is a guardian who keeps all those voices trapped in place. So maybe Jim was being careful, trying to see if he could spot that guardian. He also wanted to share information with Ethan, but he knew he couldn't tell him the whole truth because if he did, Ethan would pay the ultimate price. As I've said in multiple videos, people need to learn things for themselves. If someone else spoils it for them, it leads to severe repercussions. This is why Jim was careful when sharing what he knew with Ethan, but he still gave him one important task: find the Lake of Tears. The Lake of Tears is a recurring element tied to the Chromonocle story. I'm sorry if I don't remember this part correctly because I don't have access to the first episode to check the exact wording, but the Lake of Tears was first mentioned in the very first episode of the series. When Julie told Ethan a story in which Norman was killed by the fairies, Ethan cried and told her that the fairies are coming from the Lake of Tears. The show's producers told us that the answers could be found in the first episode. This is why I believe that the Lake of Tears is actually underground, beneath the tunnels. Back in Season 2, when Tabitha and Victor were in the tunnels, Tabitha noticed there was water there. It was a very odd detail to point out back then. So, what if that water actually came from the Lake of Tears? This is why the monsters are sleeping in the tunnels. They are trying to guard the lake. No one in their right mind would try to venture deep into those tunnels, knowing that the creatures who terrorize them are sleeping there. You saw how terrified Tabitha was while she was there. If the Lake of Tears is actually below the tunnels, then the line, "The fairies are coming from the Lake of Tears," would make even more sense. The monsters who killed Norman are coming from the underground tunnels, the same place where the lake is. Based on the trailer for Season 4, we see that Jade ventures deep into those tunnels, so deep that the monsters eventually capture him. Why would he go that far if it wasn't crucial to their escape? You also need to remember that when Jade was in the tunnels, he had a vision of the children being sacrificed, and he saw the roots of the tree creating the symbol. Taking all of this into account, I think there's a very good chance that the Lake of Tears is under the tunnels, and this is where the children were sacrificed. Jim told Ethan to remember the dream he had in the RV, but the dream doesn't end with them finding the Lake of Tears. The dream ended with everyone screaming because a spider came down from the ceiling. Now look at this drawing from Victor. This is a visual representation of that dream. The Lake of Tears and a spider coming down from the ceiling. So if the Lake of Tears is a real place, then the spider must be a real monster as well. And there have been too many hints pointing toward it. This is why I believe the guardian of the Lake of Tears is the spider. Maybe the spider is also the guardian of the voices, and this is why Jim was looking all around him, to see if the guardian noticed him talking to Ethan. I believe this was the biggest revelation in this episode, but we also had a moment in the storage room that is worth talking about. The scene where Sophia saw the ballerina. The first moment Sophia saw the ballerina, she gasped in fear. She even tried to touch it, but stopped at the last moment, almost like she was afraid of what would happen if she did. We always thought that the man in yellow was the most dangerous entity out there, and even if he wasn't the most dangerous, he had to be at least the second most dangerous. But apparently things are not as simple as they seem. Sophia's reaction becomes even more interesting after remembering that the ballerina was responsible for Smiley's death. So could these two entities be enemies? I always thought that all the evil things in the forest were working together, and that there was a hierarchy between them. The monsters were at the bottom. Next came the worms and the ballerina, then the man in yellow, and ultimately the spider at the very top. But with Sophia's reaction, it doesn't seem like my theory was right, and I'm starting to believe that the ballerina and the man in yellow stand on equal terms. Maybe the man in yellow was so afraid to touch the ballerina because he knows that the worms could kill him the same way they killed Smiley. But unlike Smiley, the man in yellow cannot revive, because he wasn't one of the people who sacrificed their children. The man in yellow is there to make sure the story continues the right way. Let's go back to one of my oldest theories, the one where I said that the reason Julie got the story walking ability was because she was trapped in the dungeon alongside Randall and Marielle. Because they survived the music box, they received powers as a reward, but each of them got a different ability. This is why Randall could walk through the dungeon ruins without being affected the same way Julie was. Seeing that the man in yellow is afraid of the ballerina, maybe the worms in the music box are actually a way to counter him. Maybe this is why the story is different this time. Because the man in yellow can't simply go against the entity that gave Julie that power, so he needs to be careful about how he handles this situation. I'm very curious about how things will play out because at the moment it seems like these are two opposite forces battling over the forest. We saw that Julie could be attacked while she was story walking, but we also saw the monsters stop when they hear the melody. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on how this will play out. Those were the two main points I wanted to talk about in this video. I'll make more detailed videos in 2 weeks because I can't really work on the channel at the moment. But I also want to point out some things that caught my attention during this episode. First, I want to talk about Acosta's character arc, because I'm sure she will play a major role in future events, and I believe it will lead the town into chaos. Fromville's favorite way of tormenting people is by giving them false hope, making them do things they believe will lead to their salvation, only for them to realize they made things even worse. I can see this happening with Acosta as well. I also think we will get a flashback of her where she either killed someone in the line of duty or was mocked because she was a bad cop who got scared during a mission. The way she constantly says she is a good cop and how she made her entire identity about her badge makes me think that something happened in her past that marked her deeply, and this is her coping mechanism for dealing with that traumatic event. Also, she is always complaining that people don't trust her and don't share information with her, but when Sarah tried to talk to her, she just dismissed her. No wonder people in town are negative about her. Secondly, whoever had the idea to display the bag on the motel sign and hang Jim in the barn was a genius. That was a brilliant scene. I must say that I'm pretty disappointed with how they turned Donna into a side character. I really liked her in Season 1 when she was in the middle of the action. Now everyone ignores her, and she only does the babysitting. For me, this was a bad choice from the writers. Donna has been with us from the beginning, and I expected her to play a major role until the end. But now she has been overshadowed by characters introduced later. I also want to talk about Tabitha. I won't say anything too negative, I just hope she gets a redemption arc, because the fandom is really against her right now. I understand that she deals with grief differently, and this was one of the main reasons she and Jim wanted to divorce, because both of them handled grief in completely different ways. But lashing out at Jade like that was unacceptable no matter the circumstances. Jade and Boyd were the ones who did the most trying to get everyone home. Lastly, I want to mention Thomas because he has been mentioned too many times not to play a bigger role in this story. Those are my main thoughts after seeing the second episode. I'm sorry that I can't make more videos about it right now, but I'm on holiday until next week. Hopefully I can restart my posting schedule soon. Let me know your opinions and thoughts about this episode. See you in the next one.